call the Oconee County Planning Commission meeting to order. First will be the invocation. Mr. Root, could I ask you to do that?
Yes, absolutely.
Pray with me if you'd like to. Well, our dear Creator, sustainer of our lives, and really the King of the universe, help us to remember that this is your creation. We've been given and blessed with the opportunity to steward it, the things that you entrust to our care, and as policymakers for the Planning Commission to really steward land use decisions throughout the county in a way that would be good, principled, helpful to all. It's a really hefty task, Father, so I just pray that you'd give them wisdom and guidance and insight that they would not otherwise have. In your name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Pledge of allegiance, Mr. Haney, could I get you to start that?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Are there any changes or amendments that we need to make to those minutes? Then all those in favor of approval of the minutes?
Aye.
Next would be the public comments for the non-agenda items. We did not have anybody sign up for that, so we're going to move straight into commission member comments.
Just clarification, I was just curious if we were going to have a chance to, having our backup materials, the goals that we had from 2023, I just couldn't see them, and I thought maybe someone could steer me towards them if they're in there.
They're on the back page.
They're on the back page, actually, it looks like, of one of these, one of these maps here.
Oh, okay, thank you, that's what I needed.
What about other commissioner member comments? Yes, go ahead.
Just, a thank you to you, number one, for the work you've done since our last meeting on trying to communicate with the council. And that kind of help and direction, is going to probably help this discussion on junkyards quite a bit. And I feel pretty confident based on what your comments were that you shared, and I just want to thank you for that. I think we've got a good year ahead of us. I hope that we'll have a chance to talk about our goals, but also hope we can narrow down what we're really going to prioritize. And I know we've got a couple good things right in front of us, but there's a lot of good stuff out there to be concerned about, such as AI. If it's nothing more than us being concerned about it and trying to emphasize educational programs on what AI can do for us and what it can do against us. That's one of the things, if we're not on top of that, we could get blindsided. So I know we'll have a chance to talk about our goals further, but I just wanted to kind of use that as an example of be nice to have an exhaustive list, but then also what are our highest priorities. Thank you.
If there are no further comments from the commission members, I'd like to turn it over to the staff for comments.
So 2 subdivisions to share with you guys tonight, to start the year. So first, a little bit smaller, 27 lots, but it's got a lot of publicity. This is the Habitat Extension. I'll let you guys look at this for just a second, and then I'll bring it up on the zoning map as well, so you can kind of see where it's going to be and how it will connect.
Can I just make a comment, James?
Please. Yeah.
This is our affordable housing in the county. just an observation.
James, at Anderson Street, I drive that frequently to the rental place. Do you have any idea what the width is on that street, and is it a county street?
Give me 2 seconds, I can find out.
I'm oftentimes
I'm
carrying
thinking it
heavy,
doesn't have any white lines, so.
well, I'm oftentimes carrying heavy equipment out of there, and that street
That's the
feels like it's
rental,
10 feet
yeah.
Oh,
wide.
no, that's Ford dealer, right?
Yep.
So that is actually a city road.
City Road, Waddle City Road.
Wahala City, I got it.
Interesting.
West Union.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Oh, that's
Okay.
right, West Virginia.
Okay.
But 27 lots, Hammerhead at the end of it. They are permitting for the full thing, but do not expect to build all of these at one time. They're looking at probably a 10-year build-out. And happy to answer any questions about this one, and then we'll move on to the next one.
Those really are good projects, as far as the build of the way they do it.
All right, this next one is 91 lots. This is gonna be
75.
off of Friendship Valley Road, right here. This is 88-acre piece. Bring you back to this one again, so you can see how it lines up. Entrance.
The lots 24 through 30 there,
Yes,
any idea how wide those lots are?
they are pretty narrow, yeah. Not exactly sure on the exact width, but they are fairly narrow. Less than 80 feet.
Are these septic?
I see one that's 95, it looks typical. 95 feet width.
You seeing that, which one is 90, oh,
You look kind of bottom middle. Number 9.
number 9.
9 in the
Okay.
back here.
Can't read that number.
So,
We were looking at the ones
What's he
that,
looking at?
Okay, it's.
yeah, so but if that gives us a good reading of that lot
Number 9.
compared to these others, so these others look still like they're probably 75 to 85,
Yeah.
75 to 80 anyway. Okay.
Are these on septic, James, or?
We don't know yet, so this is all we have from them right now. This is pretty conceptual at this point. We haven't gotten full engineering plans from them, but they are looking to get some feedback.
So compared to what we've been seeing, those are pretty good sized lots.
So no townhousing?
I'm not used to seeing this kind of configuration. When you look at lot, looks like 52, 47, 44. Just curious about that. Can anybody say, is this atypical or?
So these are flag lots. We've kind of talked about flag lots a little bit in the past, so where they have the access off of the main road and the actual buildable area is back behind the other lots.
Okay.
Again, with 47, they've got an access between 48 and 46.
So you think the driveways will come in to the road that's?
They will have to.
Okay.
Yeah, they'll have to have access off of the road, or they'll have to have an easement to get the access off the road.
Okay. Just a general comment, or maybe not general, but a comment. I happen to live further out, Friendship Valley Road than what this proposed subdivision is. And I've heard from, a few neighbors that concerned, like how much more traffic is this gonna bring in and all that kind of stuff. But, don't have anything really to share other than, this apparently typical for our county, and lots of new homes being built. And happen to come, what you might say, in my neighborhood. So, the things, that other people are concerned about sometimes when they come to talk to us are some of the same concerns that me and some of our neighbors have. not all good. I mean, like, for example, those lots going down to what looks like the lake, that particular area, if the lake is 6 feet low, it doesn't have any water in it at all. And it's not unusual for Hartwell to be 6 feet low. So, not exactly sure if they're trying to optimize the number of lake lots by the way they've made these so narrow and long, but that's what I'm assuming that they're trying to do. I don't believe there'll be any docks available. I can't say that for sure, but, there are some docks in there that go dry when the lake's down. But, I can't imagine that number, if every lot would have permission to give
Interesting.
a dock, I'd really be surprised. One other observation about this happens to be right across the street from one of our county council members for District 5. Glenn Hart.
James, was this all you had for us?
That's all for the subdivisions. Just a friendly reminder that it's a new year, so we have annual training again for all of y'all. We will be hosting one again with ACOG in this building at a point to be determined in the future. So be looking for that invitation, and we'll get it out as soon as we get the date kind of finalized. But you can also do it on your own. So if anybody is interested in doing that, there are some alternatives to attending in person.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
All right, now we're on to number 8, which is kind of a review of the goals. I'd asked James to pull up what our goals were at the beginning of 2023. It kind of gave me a grin that some of the stuff that we had put down as real important things we didn't get to. Not sure if those things are still important, but I'd like us to start thinking about what that is going to look like moving into 2024, whether we're going to adopt some of these or otherwise. But before we do that, let me see. There's, as far as comments, there's nobody signed up for comments under this section. I'm guessing that's still the case. Nobody's wanting to speak on that. All right, so let's open it up for discussion. Again, I don't want us to go into super depth because I really want to get to the junkyard stuff, but what I mainly wanted to do was say, this is what we did last year. Do we want to do this again this year as far as putting down goals? Or do we want to just kind of talk about some of the things of interest? So I'll open it up. You made the comment. Do you want to reiterate what you were saying?
Well, last year, I had down quality development regulations, and agricultural issues. And I'm wanting to add AI to that. And also our revisiting the comp plan. That needs to be on there.
I would say the same thing. I met with James about the comp plan and asked him what things were going to be our responsibility and what things were going to be staff's responsibility. There's a lot of things in the comp plan that James will be passing out to the various departments within the county for them to check off boxes of items that really they were responsible for. And then if I could ask Ms. Spicer if she's still interested to kind of go through at some point in the future, not today, but at some point in the future, whenever you're ready, to kind of say, here's where we think we are from our standpoint of being able to give directives. Have we accomplished what we had set out to do for?
Mr. Chairman, that was so much work.
If you don't want to do it, by all means, I'm not going to pressure you to do that, but that is, well, there will be some stuff coming from us. And then again, a lot of stuff that's just coming from staff just to check off boxes. So
How about I let you know next meeting?
you can let me know a couple of meetings from now because we're not going to tackle that immediately.
Okay, thanks.
Any other comments regarding this, regarding section 8 here?
Yeah, on the comp plan, just an idea that maybe James or one of the staff members could look into for us. A number of years ago, I'm gonna say, 3, And Mike, you might remember Mike Smith being in charge of reviewing the comp plan. There was a strategy that he used for that I think might be helpful. And what I'm asking of staff is to try to reclaim some of the documents that we created in order to do that. And here's the reason why. There's a lot of things that are on the comp plan that really we have no control over. So there's no reason for us to even view those. And I think we captured those. So that's my main thought about that, is that we could try to decrease what we review by looking at the things that were identified. And we had them identified in 6 different categories, and one of them was, that's not us, that's not something we are involved in.
I have asked James to kind of start working on the things that are gonna come to us as responsibilities and kind of set that aside so that we can either see that in a color format or in just a separate document.
Okay, good.
Regarding our,
They'll take a look at that document that I'm referring to.
Okay.
In that process. That's why I brought it up, because I think it's a good suggestion that they locate it.
James, is that something you can do, or do we need to make a motion for you to do that?
No, I'll just.
Okay.
We got a lot going on there already, so we'll just look through that too.
Do we want to come back here at another meeting and actually list any additional goals we have for 2024? I know that this last year, we had agriculture as an issue. We dealt with agriculture several times, I think, and determined that at least from what we were working with, they did not want this zoning criteria that we were offering as a tool, and wanting to use some of their other tools with regard to going to the state and asking for some disclosures and things like that. So I feel like we have dealt with some of these. Other than agriculture, really, we've got development, density with development, quality standards with development, and I think that is something we're going to be taking on this year. Is there any more discussion on this?
Just that, I think it would be nice if we, as a body, would invite certain people in throughout the year. And one of them would be like the chair of the Agriculture Advisory Board. And, and also, last meeting, I suggested that we try to have a closer relationship with the OJRSA and with the, plans for sewer and that kind of thing. So that's what I think would be helpful to us, is bring some people in so they can tell us what they're thinking and what they're planning on doing in the future, and keep us a little bit more informed.
James, I know that last year we were setting up where the Ag Board was going to be meeting with us quarterly. Could you send us or provide to us at a future meeting the dates of which we're kind of eyeballing, as far as at least within a month? We're thinking this month and this month and this month for Ag. And then you can either work with OJR with the Sewer Authority to set up some meeting there as well. That works within their schedule. I don't know that it necessarily needs to be quarterly. But just giving us a heads up so that we're not overtasking our agenda. Anything else?
Do you kind of know where you would like OJRSA to fit into that? Do you want them like February, March?
No, I'm thinking more in the April, May category. Anything else?
There's so many more resources than just the board.
And
I just want to throw someone's name out there, Madeline Bright. She has just been working tremendously in the networking and coordination of all these different entities. I think she specifically would be nice to have her invited to come in and give us maybe 15-minute view of, what she's learned.
I think that'd be great. She actually spoke about a year ago, and it was dealing with agriculture, and I don't remember the subject matter that she was involved with. I don't know her role in all that, but it was something related to ag.
Look, I don't know this to be true for sure, but my assessment is that she kind of like a volunteer, that she's interested in doing this, and she has her own, I wouldn't say company, but she has her own network of people that she works with. So anyway, you know, we ought to call her, or James maybe call her. We could use the staff to try to set some things on our calendar and on our agenda to invite people in. That would be my suggestion.
I don't want to say that we have to do this for next meeting, because I'm hoping that we get through junkyards tonight, but if we don't, I want to have the next meeting to also be able to deal with that. But I do want us, at a meeting coming soon, for us to be looking through some of those categories of comp plan of items that have not been accomplished, but that we have at least a public forum that that those folks could speak about. And if you have folks that you want to bring in, we can sure put them on the agenda. Again, it may not even be that we have a say, but we do have a public forum that they could at least get their message out.
That's a great idea. I'll be glad to try to make that happen.
So, all right, anything else with regard to this? Let's move on to talk about commercial junkyards. We do have Mr. Markovich signed up to talk about public comment, so if you will, sir.
Thank y'all. For the record, I am Tom Markovich. And to some extent, I'm here at the behest of the council. They were the ones who suggested and recommended that I come and speak to, on this issue to the planning commission. To be honest, I stayed out of this whole junkyard ordinance thing from the get-go. I believe in staying in your lane. My lane has always been housing, affordable housing. And so I did steer away from this. However, it caught my attention when I began to read through some things and see that there are aspects of this ordinance that could affect the overall zoning issues in this county. And it has to do with this whole idea of fences being considered a structure and being in a setback. And the extreme distances for the setbacks on the junkyard ordinance. Anyway, those are some pretty extreme setbacks. But nonetheless, that is not my concern, but my big concern is the fact that considering fences to be a structure and being in a setback becomes a big issue, because you have to treat structures equally. So if a fence is a structure for a junkyard, a fence for a residence is also a structure. And it is most likely on the property line. And it is most likely, if this would be the case, going to be non-conforming. Can you imagine if all of a sudden all the fences in the county become non-conforming? I mean, what are you gonna do about it? That is a huge issue, and this is why and not only that, I mean, there's mechanisms that are already written that you go to your zoning ordinance, and it already clearly says that fences do not come under the setback protections. That's in 38, 9.4 something. Anyway, it says, the last item in there, steps, heating and cooling units may project into required yard as a distance not to exceed 5 feet, but no closer than 5 feet to the property line. Fences, freestanding walls, hedges, septic tank lines may be located in any setback so long as they remain on the property. See, that's the thing. If we're gonna consider fences structures, there are so many, and it's because, I'm not gonna argue that they're not, because they are the built environment. But I want you to know there are so many other things on a lot that are of the built environment, including drainage. When we just go in there and grade a drainage mechanism to get rid of the water, it becomes a built structure. There's no question about that. So, I mean, when we start opening this whole concept, this whole idea, as I told the council, we're opening a huge can of worms. And I really think that, you know, I really don't have issues with the whole idea of the setbacks and all the regulations for junkyards per se. But I think this idea of not allowing fences to be in a setback or then turn around and saying, well, it's gonna be the setback for whatever the zoning is, that's where you really get into trouble, because then state law does kick in and says, look, these structures have to be treated equally. That's a problem.
I do have a question for Mr. Markovich, if that's all right. Because I do remember you speaking at the council meeting regarding the fences as being going vertical and that it being a structure. I didn't see under definition that we had it defined as a structure, but let me make sure I understand your concern is that under the current format, it's that we have the fence outside of the setback and not allowed within the setback. Is that the concern?
No, basically right now is the setback is sitting outside of, the setback is outside of the fence.
Of the fence. And I think
And
I'm
so-
hoping we're going to address that tonight.
Okay, I hope so. And then, but the other thing is that the recommendation from the committee of council was that it just be according to whatever the underlying zoning is. And, which, that's another aspect of this setback provisions, because in control free, the setbacks don't apply anyway, except for the specific setbacks that are set in, the zoning ordinance, 5 feet.
So it wasn't about setbacks, it was about going vertical outside of a setback and not being a fence to be allowed or a retaining wall or something of that nature to be allowed within the setback.
I don't know that the vertical has much of anything to do with it, to be honest. I mean, it's just fact that it's unquestionable that a fence is a structure. I mean, it doesn't matter how high it is, it's still a structure. And so, so when we start narrowing things down and what we've done in this situation is just isolated that one specific type of fence. A fence for a junkyard, and we're saying, I guess we're trying to make the argument that it is somehow different. I don't really think it is different. I think it's exactly the same as any other fence.
Hopefully we'll be able to address that. And the reason I say vertical is because from a lot of the county ordinance that are set up now, driveways, walking paths, cart paths, things like that can be in the setback. Whereas vertical buildings have to be outside of or not within that, not inside the setback.
Yeah, with the exception of, again, I go back to the zoning ordinance, it's already written in there that says fences, freestanding walls, hedges, septic tank lines, all these other mechanisms.
Can stay with, it's be in the septic, be in the setback area.
So, I mean, that's, again, I'm just trying to make sure that this whole thing, the whole zoning thing doesn't go awry, because all of a sudden we have created this new
Yep.
mechanism. That's it.
Very much appreciate it.
Yeah.
I'm hoping we'll address that a little bit tonight on some things. So I want to start real quick just talking about the junkyard, why we're doing it, and give kind of public comment to that. And then I want to get into our discussion. 4 years ago, I was shocked. It's 4 years ago, the Planning Commission was directed by County Council to come up with a county ordinance for junkyards. In August of 2020, the Planning Commission put it on our agenda to start that process. And since that time, we've played that endless game of kick the can. So in January, County Council asked us again to look at the ordinance, to fill in the blanks, to show them something in full that they can vote on. So I'm going to ask us to try and finalize that objective, hopefully this evening, but in fairly short order. Each of you should have handouts with some conceptual structure of what a finished document might look like. It contains ideas from conversations with council members and from members of the Planning Commission. As we work through this process, I want to be clear. This is not a perfect document, does not contain everybody's exact wishes and desires. But let me also be clear, it's my opinion that there is a looming threat on the horizon that if we don't act now to implement a foundation, the landscape of Oconee County could change in a very negative way. And if you'll give me a moment, I want to explain to the public what I mean by that and why I believe that to be true. In California, 42% of cars are electric vehicles. In California state law, it says within the next 11 years, 100% of light-duty passenger vehicles must be electric. And 17 other states, some very near us, are considering similar legislation. According to the International Council on Transportation, there are currently 6 electric vehicle battery recycling facilities in the United States. Only 6, and there's 6 coming fairly soon. Tesla's former chief technology officer, J.B. Straubel, clearly saw the future failure of EV batteries, and in 2017, he founded a company called Redwood Materials. It's one of the largest EV battery recycling companies in the United States. Redwood Materials announced this December their largest battery recycling center yet, $3.5 billion facility right here in South Carolina. Additionally, Redwood's competitor, Service Solutions, is opening an EV battery recycling center in Columbia this year. These 2 major South Carolina facilities will be collecting EV batteries for recycling. Understand, they're not recycling cars. They're just recycling the batteries. So I hope y'all are getting a picture that South Carolina has the potential to become America's dumping ground for wrecked electric vehicles waiting to extract that lithium battery. I don't know if y'all have read up on this, but the Tesla battery is built into the frame. And there are 178 parts and pieces that have to be removed prior to extracting that battery. And that's on a good vehicle. But there's YouTube videos out there of car frames being sawzalled apart with metal and plastic just being dumped in piles to cut the pieces away to get to that battery. I say all this because future junkyards aren't going to look like it was when I was a kid. When I was young, you go down to the local junkyard and get an alternator off an old Plymouth if you needed an alternator, or you go get a bumper off an old Ford truck, which I had to do to replace my dad's. But these facilities, these huge facilities in South Carolina are going to be needing batteries to recycle. And I would guess that their corporate marketing teams are already working with major insurance companies, and that's just a guess, but already working to say, send your wrecked EV vehicles to a facility near us so that we'll have access to batteries. So our future junkyards, after extracting a battery, may be filled with just mountains of scrap metal, plastic, leather, foam, computer parts, and carpeting. And it's no longer about selling bumpers or a good left side door. It's about mounds of cutaway material and plastic. And if this trash doesn't fill our landfills, we may end up with private landfills all over the county, unregulated. So now I'm not saying South Carolina that Oconee County shouldn't have a economic development corporation shop open up that says, hey, we're going to take in the car, we're going to cut it out, and we're going to ship all the materials as recyclable materials. But what I am saying is that we have the potential to see our junkyards become landfills because they're taking these cars in, extracting the battery, and now they just have a bunch of trash to figure out what they're going to do with. So, but this junkyard ordinance as a foundation for that is not just about the trash, it's also about the health and safety. I mean, you've got potential groundwater issues, you've got well potential issues, and you've got the fire safety issues that Ms. Spicer brought up many meetings ago. I'm sure everyone's seen on social media the EV cars that are on fire, the cell phone lithium batteries that are on fire that spontaneously ignite. According to specialists, it's described as thermal runaway. Had to look that one up. But in any case, There is a whole new industry now selling the proper type of fire extinguishing equipment just to mitigate the toxicity of these EV batteries. So it's my hope that this information shows that we need to lay some sort of foundation, that we need some sort of junkyard ordinance now before we start having EV cars coming in that are sitting in somebody's junkyard with 3 or 4 more cars piled up against them or on top of them, and all of a sudden we have something ignite and set the woods on fire. Or worse, we poison some wells. So it's my hope that that while this ordinance is not perfect, that we can come together with a balance that at least gives us a foundation that we can vote to move this thing forward, and the county council can vote to move this forward, because I think there's an urgent need to get some foundation in place. Remember, there's 2 EV recycling facilities, one opening this year in South Carolina. So in front of you is the original document that county council sent back. There's also a document that I had tried to fill in the blanks on, and a document that Mickey tried to fill in the blanks on. And then in conversations with several of you, there were ideas that you were bringing to the table as well. Yes, Mr. Nix.
I don't know if everybody's looked at these 3 documents, but I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to make a motion that we adopt your draft and work with it to develop.
As long as we're working with it, knowing that this is just a starting place rather than starting from blank.
That's
From
what I'm-
zero.
That's what I'm making a motion to consider.
I'll
too.
second it.
I'd like to say again, this is just a place to start. We want to X out anything or move forward with anything. I don't want this to be mine and Mickey's were not to be a be all end all, but just a place where we can at least have a discussion from.
Okay.
Any other comments on?
I'd like to make a comment. I see where Mr. Nix is going with this. If we have one document that we've agreed that we're going to use to move forward, and he's suggesting the document that you produced, then we can pull in discussion items such as Mr. Haney's and other people's ideas as we go. So that's why I second the motion, and I would vote for it.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
It's unanimous.
All right, then let's work off of this document. I'd like to keep Mr. Haney's next to it because there's several things in there that I think are good as well as any other input.
Mr. Chair, would you mind just giving us some of your thoughts as to how we might attack this? Not attack it as much as, what is the strategy for us to, are we gonna take line item by line item, go through? Or are we gonna talk about some of the bigger items first, like the grandfathering or the striking of certain things that people have ideas, we don't need that? What are you thinking that we should do?
My thought is if people have read that first document, if there are things that they specifically like, I'd kind of like to star those as, okay, these are items that we really don't need to give great discussion on. These are items that are already items that are liked. Let me go back and say a couple of things. In talking with various council members and in our conversations a year ago, 2 years ago, with some of the towing companies. Some of the towing companies said that one of the things that they were first concerned about was they're regulated by state law. When they bring a car in, it has to sit on their lot and they can't do anything with it. There's a lot of regulation that they have to deal with until they can either get a judge or a judge or the owner to sign off on it to release the car, and then they can deal with it in some capacity. So there's a lot of state regulation that governs the tow vehicles. So I want to make sure we keep in there about the tow vehicles. Mr. Haney had brought up, as well as another council member have brought up, that there are some tow yards that are selling parts on vehicles that they now own and could potentially fall under some category here. whether we try to deal with that today or whether we just put the tow companies on notice and say, hey, guys, this is for commercial junkyards, but at some point in the future, if there's an abuse from somebody taking in, they're really a junkyard doing junkyard business, but they've just partnered with the tow yard to kind of name themselves the tow yard, then now they're really a junkyard acting as a junkyard, and they've just put a name on it that was a tow yard. My point is that right now, I would personally like to see us leaving towing there and it just kind of, and getting through the rest of this as a foundation, as one point. Going on through there, we had council members that said the setbacks were too great. And so there were some adjustments made to those setbacks here. There was also something, if you'll look at item 3 under 754, item 3, we adjusted, there's an adjustment there of setbacks that kind of addresses the fencing, especially fencing for existing properties. What it said was, and let me just say one more thing, and I may be going in the wrong direction as far as what you were asking for, Mr. Garland, but in looking at this, I've got a property, I've got 22 acres. I would hate for somebody to tell me my fence had to be set so far in because now I can't use my own property, or it's really not used for what I want to use it for. That said, we tried to move that fence farther back, but we've allowed the junk to go right up to the edge of that fence. In truth, a fence is really not ever going to be a screen. It's not going to be, in our topography with the hills, it's not going to be something that hides the junk. To me, the fence is a visual property line for children. I mean, adults know if there's a no trespassing yellow sign every 100 feet, no trespassing. That means here's the property line. Go ahead.
Looking at Mickey's document, page 2 of 5, major local street, minor local street. That block. And then section 32-754 on the next page, 3 of 5, item delta. I'd like to make a motion that we remove those 2 items.
Remove it like what he has suggested here?
Yes.
Here, do I hear a second?
Second that.
Is there any discussion on that?
I think we should have a little bit of time to look at it before we vote on it, because I'm gonna need to look. Apparently, Mr. Nix is already ready to make that motion. I just want to make sure that you don't call the question too
Yep.
quick, Mr.
Nope.
Chair.
May I, Mickey, Mr. Haney, would you go through and kind of describe your thoughts behind that?
All right, so, I think the only difference between major and minor streets was 2 feet in width. But the floor is the physical part of those. But where they're located is a huge difference. The minor streets would put us out in a more rural area. You know, I've heard over and over about, and actually we got it on the front page, as a visual blight to the county. So it would only make sense to allow them to be out of view of the county, or the majority of the county, and allow them to be on secondary roads. It also allows it for them to have an affordable operation. The last thing you want to do is use up your major local streets with junkyards. They can be better serviced for other items. That was my idea behind it. We're kind of constraining them to a major street, whereas we should just allow them to go wherever it is feasible for them to go.
Comment, so this definition, the major local street can access residential and commercial properties, but the minor street, the primary access is residential. So a commercial junkyard on a residential property, I think is what we're trying to avoid.
Mr. Root might be able to provide clarity, but when we're talking, this says residential, it could mean a farm with a home on a road that's 2 miles long and it have one house, not necessarily a subdivision or something of that nature.
I don't know what clarification I could provide. I think I jumped back in at some point where that had been added in, and I know that the intention was to keep the junkyards out of residential areas, but I really don't recall why that particular wording was used, why it's still in there, because I know there was a lot of pushback because of the ambiguity in the definitions, perhaps to even remove it, but obviously that never happened.
I will say what Mickey was saying. When I looked at it, the roads, you went from 22 feet to 20 feet, and yet there's a lot of roads in our county that are 18 feet wide. I think Mr. Haney is right, and I apologize for keep saying Mickey. Mr. Haney is right that putting these out in a more rural setting is, one, more cost affordable, and two, provides a natural screening opportunity. I do believe that where this says residential, it's not talking about subdivisions.
No, but it could be somebody's home, and then they just randomly start a junkyard. And then you've got this, is it a junkyard or is it just a junky yard? And then you see the progression of it. Could start as a junky yard, does it progress to a commercial junkyard? And then, who knows? Does it confuse the definition of our junkyards?
Ms. Spicer, while you're on that subject, it gives me an opportunity to ask the question, when does a junky yard with, say, 10 vehicles in it, that say looks like a beginning of a junkyard, when does it actually become a junkyard? A commercial junkyard? In that, as soon as someone sells something, like a bumper, as Mr. Johnson was saying, or is it just by the state code that if you have 10 vehicles that don't have any insurance and they don't have a tag, that the state says that's a junkyard? Or, you know, and I think the question I have, to be clear, is if there's a business that's determined that is a commercial junkyard, it will be covered under this ordinance, which I understand there's, you know, the registration and that kind of thing that might help us with this.
So I think that'll be our second point, because I want to make sure we get back to the roads thing, just so we can sign off on
Okay.
that if we're going to.
Okay, so we have a bunch of setback requirements. No commercial junkyard should be located within 1,000 feet of a church, school, daycare center, nursing home, healthcare facility, hospital, public building, or public recreation facility. 1,000 feet from all designated scenic highways, 1,000 feet from any federally designated heritage corridor, 100 feet from bodies of water, da-da-da-da-da. So we're already restricting these people enough. I think it's just overly restrictive to tell them they can't put a junkyard out in the country somewhere on their own property.
One other thought is that possibly the thoroughfare could be changed, and, you know, in its use. So therefore, somebody was on a minor, now they're on a major. You know, those kind of things could happen. So I'm in agreement that we could do without this further restriction.
Any more discussion? All those in favor of removing Major Street and Minor Street out of this document, raise your hand and say aye.
Wait a second, Mr. Chair, just a matter of clarity. There was the motion also to strike D. Am I correct, Mr. Nix?
Yeah, everything associated with major and minor street.
Okay, I just want to make sure it's clear.
Yeah. Definitions.
There's two sections that actually have,
Okay, sorry.
that
I just want to
one-
make sure
the
everybody
def-
knew what we were voting on.
yes, one with definitions and one out of the sentence structures of the ordinance. So,
Around that.
does everybody understand that?
Pardon me?
Does everybody understand? And so we're going to vote here. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Did you get that? I think it was
I've got,
5-1.
Opposed, call for opposed.
Oh, I'm sorry, all those opposed, sorry.
thank you. I got 5-1.
That's right.
Mr. Johnson, if we just go back for just a second on just one housekeeping note.
Yes,
So
sir.
these are documents that you and Mr. Haney have provided. We have adopted them for this conversation, but we will add these to the backup for anybody watching or wants to see them afterwards. So those will be available tomorrow morning on the website.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well, it is my hope that we can get through this in such a way that we could get this to attorney.
I just wanted to make that clarification.
Okay. Okay?
Can I, Mr. Chairman? I think back to front page, under definitions, commercial junkyard, and we are excluding wrecker, towing, and impound services. What if the tow service is towing the damaged electric vehicle to its tow yard, and it has the same problems of spontaneous combustion, damaged battery leaching into the environment, and all that a junkyard would do? Is not the tow service also subject to the same environmental hazards for
I would-
these EVs?
Are you asking? Because I would agree that yes, it is, and I would agree that they are regulated by the state in a way that we don't have any ability to trump. And again, while this is not a perfect document, it does formulate a foundation, and if we do discover down the road, because you're correct, they are gonna be towing EV vehicles. But I don't think there's something that we can have control over with regard to that.
On that subject, I would like for Mickey to discuss why he wants that exception removed from the definition, or from the definitions. What's your rationale for that?
So, I actually think, Chairman said it best. The tow yards and record facilities have to have those vehicles in a secured lot. Once they're not in the secured lot and they're becoming parts and piece cars for the body shops or wherever, they can pull them out of that lot. Now, the problem that I see that we can run into is the tow yard becoming also a junkyard. And under the disguise, hey, I'm a tow yard, but yet keeping, a good example, these EVs that are no longer technically, I would say, insured because they now belong to him in that lot.
Okay, so it's all about the EV issue. really.
Well, it's more than that. It's also, if you're a junkyard, you're a junkyard. If you're a tow yard, you're a tow yard. Jim's is a good example. He's got the junkyard on 59, I think. And then he's got his tow yard lot.
It's on the
separate.
corner of 59-24.
Yeah, 5924, and then he's got his tow yard lot separate. Because those vehicles in his tow yard are vehicles that he's carrying, that he's responsible for. Am I, Mr. Root, am I saying this right? And the vehicles in the junkyard, he has no liability to anyone else other than himself for those vehicles.
So if we remove the tow yard from this definition though, the exception, this is an exception. It's not part of the, if we remove the exception, then the tow yard becomes a junkyard, correct?
No.
Under this definition.
And that's the way I read it. My thought is that the commercial junkyard, if it quacks like a duck, it's a duck kind of thing. The commercial junkyard, if it's a business for storing, handling, or selling junk, then that section is a junkyard. But the tow yard for impounding services or towing services inside those gates, that part you're excluding from. So if they start selling junk over here, then they fall under the commercial junkyard under a separate area.
But if we remove this exception,
No, I think it has to stay in order for it to be, in order for us
Mickey
to
wants it removed.
differentiate the two.
That's what it says. It says remove.
Right.
But they're not out operating as a junkyard, so why would they fall under that definition? So why should it be in there to begin with?
Mr. Chairman, if I could just jump in, I believe it was put in because you had folks who were in the, we'll just say hauling of wrecked vehicles business, and they wanted to make sure that it was clear that they were not being grouped in with folks who were operating a junkyard. So I think that was the genesis of that particular clause. I agree, if someone read it very carefully, this is not gonna apply because we're not storing and handling, this is part of a very temporary kind of transient process.
I will
But I
say
don't know
that-
that it's bad to keep it in there.
I will say that we had
Clarity purposes.
quite a few tow yards come in and talk to us about their concerns. And it was that we may have the appearance, by bringing vehicles in and setting a whole bunch of vehicles here, that we may have the appearance and fall under some of the definitions of a junkyard. But we're not. We're falling under state regulation of what we have to do before we can get that car out or removed. So I do think that it should be there so that we don't negligently put them into this category when they really aren't.
Okay, so my thoughts are that we don't remove that piece, that exception, nor the definition. But I do agree with Mickey that a tow yard could become an EV storage facility. So under H, under section 32-754 hotel, on page 3 of 5 of your document, I think we need to figure out a way to modify hotel to include the exceptions.
And in doing so,
That's
do
a
we
thought.
say, yeah, no, I don't, so do we say you can't pick up an EV vehicle out of the street or highway? Because I don't know that we
how
have
you
the
can
ability
do
to
that.
say that.
I don't know how you can do that, but
And I don't know that we have the ability to say you can't put it in your yard, because they've still got to find owner of record, they've still got to get permission from a judge, all that kind of stuff.
Maybe put a time limit on it.
I don't think we can, based on what they were telling us.
Well, is there a state reg on the storage of wrecked vehicles?
There's a
Rec
state
EV.
reg with regard to how the tow yard is able to dispose or get it back off of their yard. And it may be, there's stuff that's sitting there for a year. But they have to follow a particular state procedure, as I understand it. I'm not a record service, but as I understand it, the state requires a specific procedure for them to be able to get that car off of their lot once it's on there.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, I was gonna wait till it came up to this because it keeps touching on the batteries. If I could just jump in, I'm sorry to interrupt, but however you write it, when it goes to council, if it's written, electric vehicles, EV batteries shall not be stored and handled at a commercial junkyard, I'm gonna recommend to council that they delete that. Just because the body of law that I gave previously about EV batteries considered and being treated as universal waste, there's a body of law, a great wealth of regulations that govern that. Doesn't mean you can just, put these batteries in the ground, but it has time limitations on how long you can hold them, how they have to be labeled, when they have to be shipped off, if you're a small generator or a large generator. And I think if you're going to make a prohibition that would make essentially criminal to store or keep at your junkyard, you're violating state law. And so my recommendation is going to be get rid of that sentence, but keep what we had in there before, which is going to treat them like universal waste, because up to now, that's essentially the state-of-the-art regulations on it. I think we're going to have specific ones for EV batteries soon, but treat them as universal waste. It's very specific, criteria for how you have to treat them and handle them, store them. You don't get it, I think it's 1 year for a small generator, which most people would be. You can't, hold on them for longer than a year. They have to be appropriately labeled, et cetera. So you know where I'm coming from. If you keep it in there, I recommend it to council. Of course, they can do whatever they'd like to do with it too, but I would not, it's not my counsel to keep in this complete prohibition and ban.
So to make sure I understand that part, because it's kind of going off of where we were on some of this other, but it is a very important part of it. My concern is that somebody stores it in their yard, there's 3 or 4 more cars that get parked up around it, and it's set back there where a fire truck can't get in because you've got a compacted junkyard that doesn't follow the same regulations as a road or a street or a drive as far as accessing the entire property. Does the state law give that protection if that EV battery either starts having toxic stuff dropped, or does it state cover if it catches on fire?
So the universal waste regulations, all the hazardous waste regulations are meant to preempt that from happening, from a fire explosion or whatever. And that's how they tag the EV batteries, is because of reactivity and ignitability. So that's why this fits good within universal waste. Yeah, down the road, we're gonna have something more specific for EV batteries, but treat them as universal waste now. And a general prohibition for batteries, I think it's gonna be contrary to state law, and it's not gonna fly. But even if you left it in there, and it did fly for however long, people could pack these cars in there if they're, prohibited from storing them completely, just like if they're prohibited as they are now from storing them against the universal waste regulations. Does that make sense? So if somebody's gonna violate the law, they're gonna violate the law, and having that on site and holding these batteries, vehicles just piling them one on top of the other, is gonna violate the universal waste regulations just as much as your prohibition would.
Under the universal waste regulation, does it account for the other scrap that is a result of removing that battery?
It does, and that's why they put them that way, because I think they know, the regulatory agencies, state and federal, know that it's gonna be more complex with the EV batteries and, especially what's on the books. So treat them as universal waste. At that, they break down into the component parts. So as it's torn apart, it may not be a hazardous waste at point A, but as soon as it's removed, something like this happens, it becomes one. So then it has to be treated as a universal waste. So yes, it's absolutely based on the components, because not all batteries are the same, obviously.
So I guess my concern is that we've turned a junkyard into a landfill, in that now we've cut a car apart, and so you can't get to the bumper because it's no longer a bumper. It's just a cut apart plastic and metal. Sitting in a yard that is now landfill material, or landfill rather than junkyard, where things are able to sell. Does a universal waste stop that from occurring? The state ordinance.
Yeah, just want to be equivalent. So I cannot go get a 50-gallon drum of oil, dig out a hole and put it in my backyard. You cannot either. That's covered by hazardous waste regulations. This is not really dissimilar from that. I mean, the batteries are going to be covered because of the reactivity, because of the ignitability, and so you cannot do these things, such as bury batteries, store them for extended periods of time. I think, like I said, 1 year is the limit. So I believe it's covering everything you want to do. And I'm just, y'all, I don't want to keep y'all from moving with this. Keep it in there if you want to keep it in there. I will tell council just what I told y'all, and they can make that
No, I
decision
appreciate
then.
you bringing it up. I still want to make sure that, because I'm not making my point, I don't think. It sounds like with the universal waste, that as a junkyard, I take in the car, I cut the battery out, I send it down to the lower part of the state to be recycled. I've made my money. Now I have a big scrap here of a 1/4 ton of trash. Is the trash
You're
covered
talking about
under
car
protected?
parts when
The
you say
car
car.
parts.
Okay.
The
wanna be sure.
structure that was cut apart to get to that battery now is just a bunch of plastic and scrap metal. It's no longer something that you can't go get the steering wheel or the seats out of, because now it's just being cut apart.
Well, that's not universal waste anymore, right? Only the battery is universal waste.
So my question is
That's right.
that if we take this out, we aren't accounting for the landfill type activity that is also of concern here.
Well, I think that's disparate from the battery issue. So just like, that's gonna be any vehicle. Right? So once you remove the battery, cut it apart, however you do it from an EV vehicle, what you have remaining may or may not be hazardous waste in whole or in part, but that's not dissimilar from a regular combustion engine vehicle. When it's there, it may or may not have hazardous waste components in whole or in part.
Right.
By having the EV, another way to put it, by having the EV battery doesn't make the whole car hazardous waste at its end of life or anything. It's the battery.
It just makes the whole car unusable. So like in a traditional junkyard, the reason the junkyard is there is you're buying parts off of that. You're selling it. You're selling the front bumper. You're selling the alternator. You're selling the head gasket. You're selling parts off of that car that are able to be parts.
But that's not a safety issue. the part that you're talking about now is not the safety issue.
Right, but
It might be
my,
a landfill issue, might be a waste issue, but it's not a safety issue.
right, well, that's where I was going with this other section of this, was the landfill issue, is that we're creating now unregulated landfill issues.
At the junkyard?
Yeah, but doesn't, when they disassemble a car, right? They're gonna have metal and plastic, blah, 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 blah. Well, at some point, that stuff becomes a viable selling option also.
Right.
Which they're gonna collect the metal and sell off the metal also,
Okay.
correct?
We would hope at some point that would happen, yes.
Or take it to someone else that does it.
I don't see that as an issue. I just see
Okay,
the battery
right.
part.
You just see the battery part, okay?
And I think that's what Teresa pointed out in the first place, was the battery piece. I agree, that's an issue. If the lawyer is saying that that's gonna be handled under universal waste under state law, and we can't exceed those requirements by being more stringent, then I think he's got a good point.
So your recommendation is we allow the EV vehicles, do we require where they store it? Or is that, again, universal waste
That's covered.
gives the requirement of where they store
Yeah,
it?
and I will send the regulations to you all, or send them to James to send to you all afterwards, so you have some comfort level with how much is specifically covered within those regulations, because they're generally robust. And I do think there's gonna be specific ones from the federal level, and then the state will probably mirror those as to EV batteries, but they're just not there yet. I mean, they're just not following the tech. The law doesn't follow the tech closely ever. But so my recommendation was simply with H, was electric vehicles, EV batteries shall not be stored or handled at a commercial junkyard, striking that sentence, and then starting with electric vehicle batteries are generally considered universal waste, blah, blah, blah.
Excuse me, Mr. Reed,
Yes,
can
sir.
you call out where you're reading from?
Well, and then you had to strike the last sentence too.
Page 3 of 5H, on page 3.
Okay.
Yes, and the last sentence.
Okay. I've got
Essentially going with the sentence that I
question or
put in for
comment.
law enforcement committee.
Mr. Chair, I was wondering if I could have the floor for a second.
Yes, I'm sorry.
This is a possible, a suggestion for a possible way of changing the document. You know, where at the very beginning of the document, we have these findings, and we have all the way down to G. We could possibly put in an H and just let that be something up front that, that the county finds that commercial junkyards, have a responsibility for handling electric vehicle batteries, i.e. lithium batteries, which can be a concern, but other code covers this under South Carolina law, i.e., universal waste, or I'll put the code in so people can refer to it as that. And then I don't think you'd have to put anything else in the document. Do you see where I'm coming from?
Yes. So we would remove the first sentence, we'd remove the last sentence, and then we would ask Mr. Root to put the code identifier in there.
We're just gonna remove H, is that what you're saying?
No,
No.
first and last sentence.
Just the first and last sentences.
Second sentence stays.
And so we're simply,
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm just gonna say, I'd like to make that motion. I don't know if we have to vote on every one
To
of them.
remove the first and last sentences of hotel.
of
Of the
H.
H,
Okay, I was
Or to
suggesting.
move it to
as I was saying,
the
maybe I
findings.
don't like this idea, but I was saying, take it out of where it is now and put it somewhere else, which was at the very beginning of the document, section 32, 751. And just make a statement that the county finds that commercial junkyards have the responsibility for handling the EV batteries, to make it simple, and that it's covered under universal waste law for South Carolina code such and such. I don't know what the code is.
I see what
Mr.
you're saying.
Reed could deal with it. All I'm saying is, it's really not needed to be covered where it's being covered. And
We're just covering ourselves, saying it's already covered, we don't need to worry about it.
The only thing I would say to support where it is now is that the section 754 is the rules. here's the rule book. And so to reiterate it in the rule book, I think would be a good thing.
Well, that's what I'm getting away from, is trying to reiterate something that's already state law. And I think that's where Mr. Root's going is,
No, I think leaving it in there is a very good thing. Yeah, I don't want to incorporate and,
Oh,
you know,
okay.
cut and paste all of the DHEC regulations on universal waste here. But to have that reference, if you want to put it as a finding too, I'm sure you can merge it in there. But having the reference in, as Mr. Johnson says, the meat of it, the regulations. So that particular issue, which is a very important
Okay.
issue with the commission, with a lot of folks.
I can't satisfied with your response to that, and that it's not a good idea, so we'll keep it where it is.
Right, I think if you look under findings, item Charlie, it really encompasses EV batteries. Commercial junkyards can pose a potential hazard to the health, safety, and general welfare of the citizens of the county.
And then we make it into rule. You had started a motion, I think. Somebody had started a motion, I think, to remove the first sentence and the third sentence. Or did we?
Yeah, I think it's.
I think there was a misunderstanding between me and Gary, but I'll make that motion to remove the first and last sentences of hotel.
Second.
Is there any more discussion on it? Do we all understand what we're voting on? All those in favor of removing that first and third sentence, say aye.
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 It's unanimous.
So we've had two motions and two adjustments on this far. I'd like to just get this one knocked out real quick.
For clarity, weren't we talking about Mr. Haney's suggestions to remove? No one ever made a motion. Mr. Nix asked Mr. Haney if he wouldn't mind explaining it. And I might be remembering wrong if I'm
No, you did.
confused. But I didn't think that we voted on that, I'm sorry.
Was there a first and a second on it? I think Mr. Haney just,
I think now that we've resolved our EV conversation, that becomes of lesser importance. I don't think we need to do anything with it, just personally.
Just
I
keep
think
it
we
as.
just
I would
keep it as
agree that we
is.
keep that statement as is, but.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's talk about the fences real quick, because it's an easy one, I think. Mr. Haney had said 4 feet. I said 6 feet, but 5 feet of that as some sort of traditional fence with a foot of barbed wire to make up the last bit of it. It doesn't really matter to me. The reality is that a fence is a property line marker. It's not, and it's to keep the kids' dogs out. It's not gonna be a screen, and whether it's 4 feet or 6 feet or 8 feet, it's not gonna be a deterrent for somebody who truly wants to get in. This is really about kids, in my opinion, running through the woods and running straight up into a junkyard before they realize they're on somebody else's property. So I had put 5 feet with the last foot could be barbed wire strand. Mr. Haney had drop it to 4 feet altogether. The only question about a 4 feet is could a dog jump a 4-foot fence? And again, I really think that this is about a dog running off into the woods because the subdivision has come up against it and the kids are going over after it.
What kind of dog?
So, but I'm fine, again, to me, it's not a, whether it's, I think there needs to be something as a visual marker,
Yeah.
but it doesn't matter to me the height.
The reason I had stated, I'm sorry, Mr.
No, go ahead.
The reason I'd stated 48 inches, 4 feet, was your woven wire fence
Is a 4-foot
is
fence, yep,
48 inches tall.
yep.
And I do understand putting the barbed wire on top, you know, it's kind of like an extra layer deterrent from somebody crossing across it, so
What if instead of on mine, at 5, what if we said 4 foot plus the 2 foot of some other material?
then you're gonna run into a problem with your post.
Are we okay with some discussion on this as
Yeah,
well?
yeah.
I'd like to say that one of the main reasons we're wanting to protect children, I'm afraid that children would end up trying to cross it and get hurt on the barbed wire. I know I did that when I was a kid. You know, I got cut up sometimes because I was going where I shouldn't go, or where somebody didn't want me to go. So anyway, what I'm saying is, I don't think we should say barbed wire. I would go personally 5 feet and just keep it at that.
The average height of a 7-year-old child is 4 feet. And if the purpose of the fence is to prevent something from coming in, it needs to be higher. I looked across some of the counties in the state that had fence decorations in their junkyard ordinances. Abbeville has an 8-foot fence requirement, Aiken, 8 feet, Anderson, 8 feet, Cherokee, 8 feet, Clarendon, 6 feet, Darlington, 6 feet, Greenville, 8 feet, Greenwood, 8 feet, Hampton, 8 feet, Horry, 8 feet, Jasper, 8 feet, Lawrence, 6 feet, Lexington, 6 feet, Marion, 8 feet, Marlboro, 6 feet, Orangeburg, 8 feet, Pickens, 6 feet, Saluda, 8 feet, Spartanburg, 8 feet. It seems to be in uniform with the rest of the state if we have 8 feet, and I think the purpose is a screening so you don't see what's in there. The average height of a car is like 5.5 feet as it is. A pickup is over 6 feet. So if it's used, if you want to screen it and the whole purpose is not to show what's in the junkyard, you need to account for your pickups, I would say the bigger cars that are going to be located in there. Otherwise, I don't know the purpose of the fence.
Well, as we were kind of talking about it, I don't think you can screen in the topography that we live in here in the mountains, that you can use a fence as any sort of screen. It's going to more.
Well, I think there's some junkyard, tow yards, auto body shops that are junkyards that are on flat areas. I don't know if you can generally say that to every place in the county. But I get the hill thing, but I don't think it's everywhere.
It's not in Aiken, for sure, for sure.
Mr. Chairman, in general, this document isn't about screening on the sides, just screening at the front of the business, where roadside. So, I mean, unless I'm misunderstanding, seems that it matters how high the fence is and what the material is acceptable, and maybe even what's not acceptable. But I don't see the sides as screening. I mean,
So 2 different heights fences is what you're suggesting, potential? Or,
no, I was making an observation based on Mrs. Spicer's comments. She was talking about the screening. I was just trying to clarify.
to clarify, that
This
would be,
document isn't talking about using the fence as a screen. Am I correct?
I would say that this is not talking about using the fence as a screen, more as an identifier of your trespassing.
Okay. Just
Um,
want to try to clear that up.
And again, it doesn't matter to me, but I want us to plug something in here. And whether that's keeping it at 6 feet, whether it's changing it to 8 feet, or whether it's dropping it to 4 feet.
I think it should be something that you reasonably can buy material for.
My thought about the woven wire when we originally were talking about it, because I've done it with my house, is did the 4 foot, then I cut woven wire in half and put it across the top, and it gave me a 6 foot. But again, we just need to plug in a number.
Sounds to me like 6 feet is a good benchmark. I mean, 6 or 8 feet, but 8-foot fences are a good bit more expensive than 6-foot fences.
So using the example that we are working off of, in there, we're gonna scratch through the line that says 5 feet with the remaining top 12 inches being the same material of barbed wire.
What page are you on?
It would be page 2, the very top in red. We keep woven wire, but we take out the sentence in red so that it stays 6 feet. In red, it said of at least 5 feet with the remaining top 12 inches being of same material or barbed wire.
I'd like to make a motion that it's 8 feet to keep with uniformity with the rest of the state. Well, unless I hear a really good reason to go less.
I think the state is flat. We're in the 2% that's not.
I heard a lot of 6 feet, Pickens 6 feet,
Yeah.
Lawrence 6 feet. They were
Pickens was 6, you're right. Marlboro was 6.
Lawrence.
Clarendon, Darlington, Lawrence, and Lexington. Yep.
I don't think we're outside the realm of,
Mr. Chair, for lack of a
Precedent.
second.
I was gonna say, is there a second on that? Would someone like to make a motion to remove the red sentence?
I don't think you need a motion because that's your edit.
Okay, so we just take that back out. So we're all in agreement to take that back out then. We are working off of this document, though.
Yeah, okay.
So I'll make a
Keeping
mo,
woven wire.
we're keeping the word woven wire.
Okay, well then motion to, move to, put woven wire in.
Woven wire is in on the document here.
We adopted
Okay,
that.
I thought it was not part of the document since it was in red.
Well, yeah, right, so we're working off of this document. It's kind of an add or remove or change. If everybody's working off
Point
the
of
same red line.
information, Gary, when we voted on Mike's document, we voted on the red stuff too.
Mike, Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
if we're gonna remove that sentence, we need to go up further in and it says, or other approved material of it, where it says of at least. You know what I mean? Do we need to end the sentence or
Oh, I got you.
end the sentence at the woven wire?
The finished side of the fence shall face the public and be constructed of treated lumber, services, et cetera, woven wire or other approved material, period.
Oh, or period there, okay.
Not period. The red comes out of at least 5 feet with the remaining 12 inches being the same material or barbed wire strand. The rest of that sentence comes out. So I'll make a motion that we, after material, remove the rest of those words
Second.
to the word fabric. Second, so any more discussion on that part? All those in favor? Aye.
It's unanimous.
We got 3 things out of the way. The red here, I didn't strike that out. That was actually stricken when we sent it to council, but let's go ahead and vote on where it's on page 2. Non-conforming shall mean, it's the middle of the page. Non-conforming shall mean structures used, land characteristics. This was for some reason taken out as a definition. Mr. Root, do you have any information on that, maybe?
Just wasn't needed.
Okay.
I think the way the grandfathering language was going, it wasn't needed, my recollection, and it got red line struck, I think, to send it to, the first time to law enforcement committee, so they would see what that deletion was. I think that's what happened.
So I'd like to make a motion that we remove that altogether.
Second.
Any discussion on that? All those in favor?
Well,
Oh,
I
sorry.
want to just bring up one point real quick. So in section 32-755, we do use non-conforming commercial junkyard, but everywhere we use non-conforming, it's a part of the commercial junkyard. So I think that is sufficiently clear that we don't need a definition for non-conforming by itself.
Yeah, in fact, they even go a little bit crossways, yeah, I agree.
Okay. So Mr. Root kind of agrees with that. Any more discussion on this? All those in favor of removing that red line, say aye.
Aye.
Unanimous.
Oh, okay. Going under setbacks here, it would be 754. It looks like B, sections B.
We've already adopted the red wording and the lineouts are gone.
Did we make a motion to adopt those?
Yeah, when we adopted this document.
Okay, so,
They're
okay.
already
Do
adopted.
we need to, so we're good with that as it reads then?
Yep.
Okay. I'm just going down through each page here of where there were additions made to the existing document. So now we would get to page 5. This would be 755A. Mr. Root, can you elaborate if we've done anything wrong here? The objective, the thought and the objective in talking with James as to the possibility is that one, someone who believes themselves to be a junkyard would call in, email in, whatever. James would go look or have some formula for saying, yes, we would define you as a commercial junkyard. One, we are now able to track where the junkyards are and who are those junkyards. And that we would ask people to register in, not permit in, but register in within an 8-month period. And it's our understanding that while the state permits, we have not been able to get those records of the state permits. So we're asking people to register if they believe themselves to be a commercial junkyard. James identifies, yes, they are. And we're then looking under the public-facing side of the GIS website, where it would be owner of record when you would click on that property, that it would say commercial junkyard in addition to their name. Is there a problem with that being done? The thought being is it helps the junkyard because it provides a buyer beware opportunity to, if you're researching around where you're about to buy, it just flags that, oh, there's a junkyard through the woods that is my neighbor. So it helps the junkyard in that respect, gives incentive for them to register. Two, it provides registration for us. Is there any legal reason why we couldn't do that?
The concern that pops out to me is, well, first, do we label any other businesses on GIS? So you're segregating out
Don't,
commercial
and that's why I'm
junkyards.
bringing it up.
Yeah, so what would be the reason to demarcate them differently from any other place that may be noxious or a nuisance type use or something like that people may not like? Why carve out because I'm sure the complaint would be from neighbor 5, houses down or wherever. Hey, I'm trying to sell my house now. This is not the same kind of junkyard as this other commercial junkyard. But now everyone who looks, does their due diligence is gonna see I'm nearby a commercial junkyard and so my property value just went down. This is what comes to mind is.
Right?
But if we're doing it cross county with, all major kind of industries and it's what's good for one is good for all. But that was the, equal protection is not always that easy to win on. For something like this, the government just has to have a rational justification for what they're doing. So that's how I always come back to this why.
No, and that's why I ask, is it objectionable enough that we should not be doing it?
When I first read it, I was like, don't do that. So I don't know, that's not a fulsome legal opinion, but that was my, that's probably a bad idea.
Is there a place within GIS that we could add an extra field that would be readily available? We do zoning, we have a zoning category, we have some of these other categories. To me, a commercial junkyard is a commercial business in a rural area, or often in a rural area rather than a commercial area. Yeah, we have commercial zoning. Is there anything that we could do to help the junkyard identify itself that I hear what you're saying, it's a deterrent to somebody that's potentially wanting to sell.
Yeah.
That's not a legal issue.
No, it's not so much of a legal issue. Unless something were to come across and you put it in place and it's an equal protection claim, and I don't know that would ever come to any kind of fruition or big liability concern for the county. Well, what did you do with the agricultural ones when y'all were speaking of putting those, labeling those on GS? I know it was 80% of the county, but
Right, it kind of just fell to the wayside in conversation when we dropped the whole, because the ag group didn't want us dealing with it. So it just kind of stopped in conversation. The thought was trying to incentivize somebody to call in and say, hey, I'm trying to find out if I'm a junkyard or not. We give them a period of time to do it, or they no longer are grandfathered in, maybe that's incentive enough. But to me, it was providing a protection because we're not requiring an existing grandfathered-in property to fence themselves. So we were trying to provide the opportunity for a buyer beware area to say, hey, I've got kids, there's a junkyard through the woods, maybe I should take it on my own responsibility to fence my own yard. Because I've identified that 200 yards through the woods is a commercial junkyard.
yeah, and there's good rationale for what you're saying. I agree. I'm just.
No, I mean, we don't want to do any.
Initial gut response to it. And maybe the best way to do is, if y'all feel comfortable keeping it in from a policy perspective, roll with it, and I'll flesh out the research to see if there's any analog to it that, where a county got dinged for doing something like that.
I was just
Yes, sir.
trying to answer the question that Mr. Root brought up, is that, what's the justification to designate a commercial junkyard outside of any other, and I'm not quoting you, of course, but the justification is you are now included in this ordinance, that if it comes into fruition, we're wanting to identify you for a good reason, because you're restricted by the regulations of this ordinance. So I don't see any problem with keeping it myself.
Well, I think the findings actually provide the answer to why we want them to identify themselves, right? The findings stated in the beginning of the document.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
can I just ask you a question, kind of generally about due diligence and people looking for it? Right now, there are no signage requirements in this ordinance. Would an on-site sign accomplish what you're looking for people driving by doing due diligence versus something more easily available on a website?
I like where you're going. Here's my thought. Right now, James has identified what he believes are 7 junkyards in the area. Unless that number has changed, 7 items that he would think are commercial junkyards. I would say that 90% of the citizens of this community, myself included, couldn't tell you where more than 2 of them are. And so, to me, doing a drive-by when something's off in the woods, where we hope it would stay, is not necessarily going to get us there. I think that we either try to keep it in or we just take it out. I just thought it was a good way to, 1, get people to register, and 2, to get people to take responsibility for their own properties.
I did.
So, unless somebody wants to take it out, let's leave it in for now and let Mr. Root hash it out. Hopefully coming back with an idea that might still accomplish what we're trying to accomplish.
And as a backstop, I mean, the general feeling was the signage is a reasonable alternative too. I like that idea, because someone who's gonna buy around the area is gonna drive by. And then that doesn't put an onus on the county too, which certainly the county will do. I'll just say likely to keep up with what is still a commercial junkyard, what is, no longer a
Right, no,
commercial junkyard,
I don't
whatever.
disagree with what you're saying. So, I'm gonna ask, we're gonna keep it and ask you to maybe structure something around signage, because now we have to define sign and what that sign looks like and how big it is and where it can be and does it fall within our sign rules? But if that's the direction that you feel like we need to go, if you could kind of, go ahead and make that paragraph more robust and correct if need be. Does that need a motion? Everybody good with that? Just as it is? Going down under B, is everybody okay with B then, as far as registration, that they do have to register by a particular time in order to be grandfathered in under B?
Well, just one thing that comes to mind is this is a one-time registration. I was wanting to talk about the end game. What if someone does go out of business? Are they required to remove their sign? Are they required to remove their junk cars or whatever property that they have on site that could be defined as those elements which creates a junkyard, a commercial junkyard? That's one of the things that we don't approach with this ordinance, which may need to be.
So, let me say something real quick. Here's a conversation that I had with one of the county commissioners that I thought was a good idea. I really think that we can get a foundation without trying to work through that idea in full. But the idea was that some of these junkyards that might go out of business, they've got a lot of scrap metal. Some of these places that do have a lot of scrap metal, whatever that might be, that at some point, county council say, look, we'll rent a crusher and we'll split the profits of the whatever was crushed, if you'll get it to us, for some of these that are out of business, et cetera.
This is an even easier answer. So, Section Charlie, item number 1, if the junkyard is abandoned for a period of 12 months or more, it becomes a non-conforming junkyard and the regulations now apply to it. So that piece motivates whoever the owner is to either clean it up or come into compliance.
I don't know if it does do that, Mr. Nix. I'm a little confused with it, maybe you can help me straighten out, but it says operations are abandoned for a period of 12 months or more. So what is gonna happen after that 12 months or more? Nobody ever takes an interest in it. Someone passed away, it could go on for evermore, that there's just a bunch of junkyard stuff out in the commercial junkyard property. That's the end game I'm talking about. that this doesn't approach.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Root, I know with applying for commercial landfills, you require to be bonded. Is there, in case you walk away from it, is there any mechanism like that dealing with commercial junkyards?
I don't know if it would apply to this same pretty broad definition that we have for anybody or any entity that's in the business of, storing, selling junk is gonna be a commercial junkyard. But I know that DHEC reclamation provisions, when you deal again with hazardous waste substances, are gonna apply. So at the end of the operation, you gotta do X, Y, Z to clean the land and have it serviceable for whatever new use. How it exactly apply here, I don't know, but I can certainly pin that down. But yes, there is a body of law out there for end-of-life reclamation for operations, which I think some of these certainly would fit into. I'm just not sure all of them because we have a broader definition. That makes sense?
Yes, sir.
Do we have to add something, or does state law within ordinances of junkyards, et cetera, cover what you just said?
Oh, the state law is going to cover the reclamation. It's just a matter of whether it's going to apply to these operations, which I'm going to have to pin down. So, but what Mr. Gollin's speaking of, I don't know that it's not really covered one way or the other here. It would be more of a new fulsome section kind of at the end. At the end of operations, you're going to do these things.
My point in conversation and what Mr. Gollum was saying is that there was some interest, at least from one council member, I don't think it needs to be in our document, that if there are abandoned facilities, if we do find that there's massive junk, that at least now we have a registration and we could send a notice out, hey, we're gonna be having a bring your junk to work day, or bring your junk to the county day and that the county is working on renting some crusher on some property that says, you bring it in and we're gonna split the profits. Again, I don't think this needs to be here. I think we need to create a foundation, but if we find those things in the future, I think that that's a second layer that could be built upon this.
I have a question. Any existing commercial junkyard that registers can be exempt from requirements 3274A through G. So G is being in compliant with the International Fire Safety Code. Do we really want to say that they don't have to be in compliance with the laws addressing handling, storage, and disposal of hazardous waste? I mean, I would say G stays, and then the next one, F, that's the whole DHEC, NPDES permits and all that. Why would we let somebody not have those permits?
Mr. Root, is F and G, do we know if those are already within the state requirement for junkyard?
But yeah, these are discharge permits that are state permits. If it's required for the particular operation, then it's gonna be required. I'm with Ms. Spicer on this. I wouldn't want to leave these two out.
So we would take and change from A through G to A through E?
Then you're saying they don't need a fence.
Well, they don't need a fence. I think that's the whole deal until they become non-conforming.
Okay.
So yes, I would say through E.
So I'll make a motion that in that sentence B, that we change G to F. E, excuse me, G to E. We have a second on that.
A second.
Is there any more discussion on that? All those in favor, say aye.
It's unanimous?
Okay, good catch. We're good with leaving A and letting Mr. Root work that. We've made a change to B under C. Is everyone fine with leaving that wording, or is there anything that needs to be adjusted under C?
I just want to point out something. So if an operation of a commercial junkyard is abandoned for a period of 12 months or more, it now becomes a non-conforming commercial junkyard. But it also no longer meets the definition, which is selling. Is a business for storing, handling, or selling junk. At what point does it not become a commercial junkyard anymore when somebody abandons it. I mean, that's kind of what we were talking about,
Yeah,
right?
how do we make that, how do we correct that,
I don't know.
wording wise?
Is that something we're gonna have to address later, or that you said we need a bigger platform for? or-
No, I think you hit on something that Mr. Root has vacated the room. Any existing commercial junkyard, the register considers non-conforming
Then we'd have to put in the definitions, wouldn't we?
unless
Junkyard is no longer a junkyard.
one of the following arises. Any commercial junkyard, non-conforming, unless it's abandoned. Then it is a conforming junkyard. So, make sure I understand right, if a non-conforming yard, which in other words, we're gonna call a grandfathered yard, is abandoned for 12 months, then it now is converted to following all of the other provisions.
Right.
So do we need a provision that says if a junkyard is abandoned for X period of time, what happens to it? I don't know that anything would happen to it. It would just be junk in the woods at that point, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that you can do anything about it.
No, but you can start, if the movement is toward a bond to protect the county, I think it was Jasper has a bond situation, and then it's X number of dollars for X number of acres. It's their formula for it, to protect themselves on an abandonment, I guess.
I wonder if there's any state regulations, including that your universal waste code, which would cover that. I don't know that there is, but if it were, then we wouldn't have to try to put it in here.
I think Mr. Root was checking in, or was gonna check into that.
So here's a couple of things for right now. I do think that there is the possibility for junk to just remain junk. However, if we don't put a junkyard ordinance in place, the junk is going to typically remain junk. So I would say we continue with it as it is, and if it's something that is down the road is addressed as a second layer, or if Mr. Root can come up with a bonding mechanism that is satisfactory. But right now, if we don't put something in place, junk is just gonna be abandoned junk, which is our concern.
So what are you saying?
So I'm saying that when Mr. Root comes back, we ask him to identify if there's a bonding mechanism that makes sense.
Okay.
Otherwise, we'd leave it as it is until we see somebody who has abandoned their junk. And then we try to figure out what we're gonna do with it, maybe along the suggestion lines of the county as far as their cleanup idea.
It might be covered under the International Property Management Code at that point.
Mr. Root, we did have one question.
Yes, sir.
Under 755C, existing commercial junkyard will be considered as non-conforming unless one of these things apply. So what we're saying is that the existing junkyards are grandfathered in unless something here happens. And our first one was, it's grandfathered in unless it's abandoned for more than 12 months.
Right.
Now it's no longer grandfathered in and it falls under the requirements. But it's abandoned. So it's abandoned junk, whether it's a new junkyard or it's abandoned junk, whether it's an existing junkyard. Is it your recommendation that under new junkyards, we have a bonding issue, some sort of bonding mechanism, that if they go out of business or something, that there is a cleanup process? So that we would put under A through E of the rules, so that if then a grandfathered became abandoned, nobody bought it, it then falls under the rules which says you now have to bond yourself, which they're not gonna do. So they're not gonna do it. That just answers my own question.
So are you referring to just the ones that are been abandoned and then someone else is gonna start an operation? Just those have to do?
No, I'm saying that,
Or
which we don't
everybody
have
has
a
to
rule
do it?
now in existence in the county, but what the question was is if somebody abandons their junkyard do we have a way to get it cleaned up, or is it just gonna stay junk somewhere?
I think that's what the last question, I thought that's one of the things I was charged with was to
Yes.
see what, for the hazardous waste reclamation, which
Okay.
is like, hey, you gotta fix your land after you've done this activity on it, how far that stretches to, and how much of these operations would reasonably be encompassed by that.
So C will be something that we'll be asking you for more information on, A and C.
Yes, yes.
Going on down on the 1 through 4 or 5, in the original document we sent to council, there was nothing there, they were all blanks. We've added some things. Safety violation was a non-starter for everyone because it was too vague, too subjective. Lighting, noise, dust, things like that was kind of a non-starter for a lot of people because you could have two neighbors that are having a squabble over something entirely different than the junkyard. Go ahead.
Point of order, revisiting our adoption of this document. As it stands right now, we've adopted 1 through 4, and we have not adopted 5, 3, and 5.
So we really, so
We
as long
don't
as
need a
we're good
motion
with
unless
this.
we're gonna change this.
Yep,
right?
okay. So everybody's pretty good with that, or do we need to have a conversation about anything there?
I'd like to discuss number 4.
Okay,
So it's stating after more than one occurrence. What's the duration of time?
if it's more than one occurrence, I would say it would be the second occurrence and immediately following that second occurrence.
But it's
But
not,
we could say within 12 months.
should it be within 12 months?
Okay.
6 months?
Tell me more. That if they've had one, then they have to comply, or?
No, what I'm saying is, there's no time frame there. So if I own a junkyard for 20 years and I had a safety violation or an occurrence where EMS was called out, and then 20 years later have another one, well, that's 2 occurrences. There's not a time frame.
Gotcha. If there are 2 occurrences, if there's more than one within a period of time.
Correct.
Gotcha. That sounds pretty legit to me.
So what would the time frame be, Mr. Haney? Do you have any ideas?
Well, it's, once again, it's kind of very vague.
It's subjective.
Yes, and the EMS call out,
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
Stuff happens. I mean, EMS call out,
Well, and we kind of said it right here, that this isn't somebody having a heart attack or a stroke. This is
No.
if they're called out because of an event, and I don't know how to word that, but because of an event,
I mean, if a guy breaks his leg,
EMS called out. Trying to make it as less subjective as possible in that you have professionals, either fire or EMS, that have said, yeah, they were called out.
I've got a, Mr. Root, does OSHA dive into junkyards for safety regulations at all?
Of course.
I wouldn't see why they'd be exempted. I would think any kind of a, yeah, I mean, it's not
Be the
not a
hazardous
mining
waste.
thing, it's, yeah, I mean, just
So-
occupational safety things are there.
I'm wondering if we should maybe set this one aside and see what they consider as a major violation,
What OSHA considers as a violation?
and use that as a foundation.
Does OSHA deal with employees, or does it deal across the board?
Well, if you're a commercial entity,
it includes everything on site.
It's mainly looking for, yeah, I mean, it's mainly looking for the workers, but it's certainly, usually those, I think it's my experience, are triggered oftentimes when there's an intersection with the public and something happens that is a safety violation.
Yes, sir.
so where I'm going with that is, do we even need this in there if OSHA themselves are gonna be regulating junkyards?
I don't remember, I've read that state junkyard ordinance a few times, and I don't remember it saying OSHA in there. So are we saying that OSHA simply regulates it because they do?
I know they do sawmills.
Sounds kind of something.
Mr. Markovich seems to have an
I'm gonna
answer.
make a motion to change the wording to the following.
Okay,
You ready? Number 4, more than one occurrence, comma, within a period of 1 year, comma, strike after this article is in place, where the fire department and/or EMS is called out for an active fire or injury directly related to the business, comma, other than heart attack, stroke, or other health issues unrelated to the business.
Was that a motion?
That's a motion.
I'll second
I
that.
second that, yeah.
You second
Yeah,
that.
I like that.
Would you like for me to read it again?
Sure, go ahead.
More than one occurrence within a year, or within a period of 1 year, where the fire department and/or EMS is called out for an active fire or injury directly related to the business, other than heart attack, stroke, or other health issues unrelated to the business.
Okay, so we got a
May I
motion
make
with
a-
First and a
second,
section,
for
and-
discussion.
May I make a friendly amendment? I think we should put neglect in there. Related to the business could mean that you're just on the property gathering something and you do something that's unsafe to act. It was not a neglect of the junkyard. It was you yourself using a
Contagious.
Sawzall in the wrong way.
I make a motion that we, take a break for 3 minutes.
Second.
Do you need a break?
No, I'm good, sorry.
I withdraw my motion.
You didn't want to?
Okay,
You read through the motion, you asked for an amendment
Yes.
to that, the word neglect put in front. Is there a second on his?
Where does the word neglect go?
Oh.
How do you fit it in the,
Let me get there.
Is called out to the business for,
Yeah, I don't,
there hasn't been a second on this, just so you. Has somebody seconded the motion? I haven't
No.
heard it.
seconded in my motion?
no,
I
seconded
got Nick.
Mr. Haynes. Has anybody seconded Mr. Haynes?
no.
Other than being asked where it would
We
go?
have to figure out where this word might go.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out where it's at to see one more occurrence occurred. Read yours again.
You ready?
Yep.
More than one occurrence within a period of 1 year where the fire department and/or EMS is called out for an active fire or injury directly related to the business, comma, other than heart attack, stroke, or other health issues unrelated to the business.
Mr. Haney, we don't have a second on that one.
No.
More discussion on
Yes.
this motion? Yes, sir.
I want to bring up the fact that if you're aware of this ordinance and what it's calling for, you've had a fire in February, and now it's June, and you got another fire. It's like, I'm not gonna call the fire department. I'm gonna see if I can handle this on my own. You know, I don't like what this does, and it's just so vague, you know, with all this health issues and stuff. I think I just don't see it being something that you could really expect people to adhere to. I mean, it's unsafe not to call the fire department. But if you think you're gonna have to spend, say, let's just say $10,000, well, I'm not gonna call the fire department, not until next year when I have a problem. See what I'm saying? Anyway, I think with all the OSHA requirements and all that kind of stuff, we might better go with some type of government citation that they received. See what I'm saying? I mean, they were penalized for something that was unsafe. We know about it. They've done it twice within a year, or within 12 months, I should say, not within the calendar year. Then now they're gonna have to, they're not grandfathered anymore. You see where I'm going with that?
Well, and that's what this is reading right now. And you're correct. They're not gonna call about the second fire because they're gonna lose their grandfathering status. when they do it.
Well, do you understand what I'm talking about as far as citation? If we hinge it on something that there's a governmental citation that they received, you know, say OSHA or DHEC, then, you know, it should be a matter of public record. Then you could then penalize them instead of making it some kind of accident or fire or whatever. You know, there's a lot of things that we can't even imagine that are bad things that they could get citations for.
So we're saying instead of EMS or fire, we're saying if they get citation, then it would trigger non-grandfathering.
Yeah.
Is that?
Yeah, that's.
Then the neighbors can call people out on you.
Well, that's
Get
not
back
government
to,
citation. Okay, so when I say government citation, maybe we need to define it a little bit further, like OSHA or DHEC. But there's a citation that's public record. They've got 2 of those in 1 year, or 12-month period, then they lose their grandfather. That's a lot better way of doing it than, it doesn't put it on us to figure out, oh, they called the fire department twice, you know? And they're not gonna admit it.
And it would be a government citation. In other words, I don't think it could be just a neighbor calling, disputing some, because they didn't get invited to the Christmas party. I do think that it would be a government agency that would be saying, you have violated X, Y, Z. So it'd be a true violation of,
Mr. Chairman.
yes.
Going by experience, if you get more than 2 OSHA fines within a year, you got bigger troubles than worrying about whether you're grandfathered or not.
Well, that might be true, but that doesn't change what we're working on right now.
So this item 4 is saying that if something is triggered here, it requires you to now do all the fencing and do some of these other items.
Point of order.
Yes, sir.
So I'd like for us to discuss the amendment that I made and vote on that, and then we can move on to decide if we want it or not.
Okay.
Call the question?
All right, so we're voting for Mr. Nix's motion. All those in favor of his motion as it was read and written? All those opposed?
Here.
Pass 5-1.
Okay. Mr. Chair, we're open for other amendments there.
We are, let's go, yes, go ahead.
Okay, in that same section, item number 2, the storage of handling area reserved for junk is expanded by 15%. We've all agreed to that based on what Mr. Nix is making a point. I don't like that. I think it should be changed to where it's a certain amount of acreage. So my motion, I move that we change number 2 to say the storage or handling area reserved for junk is expanded by 1 or more acres. Now, if I get a second, I'd like to explain why.
I'll second.
Can I explain why?
Yes.
There's no way for James or me or you or anybody else to go, oh gosh, he just expanded by 16%. He lost his grandfather. So that doesn't make sense. So I think it needs to be an amount of acreage, something that's measurable.
So
And I'm
if it's
voting for
a,
friendly amendments if
so if it's
1 or
a,
more acres isn't the right amount. I'd be willing to listen, but I came up with that because at least you've got something you can measure. And then the other thing about the expansion, sometimes it's not necessarily, you're expanding as you grow your business, you know, so.
well, and again, this is, this would be existing junkyards doing their existing footprint of their existing work. This would be them clearing more land that probably is showing up on a 2020 and a 2016 and a 20 whatever, aerial view.
This doesn't say anything about land. That's the reason why I'd like for people to support my friendly amendment to going from a percentage to 1 or more acres.
So it would be land at that point,
Right.
completely
If
identified.
you're expanding, what are you, if you're expanding, if you're not expanding the land, what are you expanding? Are you going up?
Business. Anyway, it
How-
doesn't make sense. There's nobody that can say that somebody is in violation of that.
To,
You don't have anything that says it's related to land.
actually, we do, the word area there, as opposed to revenues or something of the nature, the handling area,
No,
storage or handling area.
well,
So,
To
but I
me,
get
I
your
don't-
point, yeah.
I
Yes,
mean, just like someone else said, you could go up, you could, there's all kind of stuff. So anyway, I think it would be better. And if you think about it, that's really what we're talking about, is
The expansion of the
using
footprint.
more land.
Mhm.
So why wouldn't you use it a measure of land?
Okay,
And why would you hurt somebody that's got a small business and then allow someone else to expand a whole lot more just because they got a big business?
2 comments here as well. And then-
Go ahead.
So, first of all, I think the staff is able to determine a percentage of the parcel. I think they can look on, I think they can make that determination. Second of all, I think if you say an acre, you got one person who's got 20 acres. You got another person who's got a 3-acre junkyard. So you're gonna let the 3-acre junkyard expand by 25%, but you're only gonna let the big junkyard expand by 5%. How's that fair?
It's a whole lot fairer than what it is now. Because now you're saying, if somebody wants to go to 2 or 5 acres or something like that, I'm open to that suggestion, but it doesn't make sense to ask James to go look at some parcel of land that they started to use.
So the bigger a junkyard is, the way yours is gonna work, and I'm not saying I'm for or against it, I'm saying the bigger a junkyard is, the less it can expand.
Which is
If you
more
put an
fair.
acre,
It's more fair than going on a percentage. Because what you're doing is you're investing in a monopoly now, because here's a guy that's got plenty of land and he can span more often and everything than some other guy that doesn't have as much. So you're penalizing the guy who doesn't have a.
you're penalizing based on size and not scale, though. I don't,
Yes, sir.
How are you gonna enforce this? Do we have,
That man right there with the badge in his pocket.
Yeah, I think that's.
he gets to
Make
make
a
that
motion,
call.
we take a break, get it out.
There's a motion to take a break.
Second.
Second. All those in favor? 5-minute break? Aye. Good. Yep.
And it,
Yep.
You're pink, no, you can't.
All right, we are back live. We have a motion and a second regarding this
where are we? Four?
conversation of changing from 15% to an acreage amount.
Can, I say we leave it at a percentage, because 15% is, to the little guy, is the same as 15% to the big guy. You know, it's their size of operation. It's an equal way to measure. Like you said, you start putting acres on there, 2 acres to a 3-acre operation as opposed to a 100-acre operation is a big difference. So I'd say leave it back at the 15% line.
My personal thought is that this is talking about grandfathered junkyards becoming non-grandfathered anymore. And right now, James thinks he's identified 7. Again, I couldn't tell you where maybe any more than 2 are. But as we become a more dense area, I think a small junkyard of 3 acres, and he expands 2 more acres, he's now doubled in size and encroached out where maybe he's more visible than this and that. I really think we need to leave it at a percentage.
Question for the staff. Excuse me. When we identified these possible 7 junkyards, what did the sizes range from and to average?
I couldn't tell you what the top end was off the top of my head, but it was pretty substantial. The smaller is gonna be that less than 5 acres, 3, 4, somewhere in that ballpark. So it's a pretty big gamut,
So there is a big gap.
yes.
What was the largest one, if you remember?
Yeah, it'd be more than 20.
Thank you.
If there's no more discussion, the motion has been to change from 15% to an acreage amount. All those in favor of changing from 15% to an acreage amount, raise your hand by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed to changing that,
Motion fails.
okay? So we're gonna leave that at 15%. Are there any more under those points 1 through 4 that need to be in conversation?
I'll make a motion to remove number 4 in total.
I'll second it just so we can discuss it.
It'd be wonderful if we had OSHA that would oversight, or some authority that would give oversight.
OSHA's very active in our county.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
if I could, and yeah, there's no exception for OSHA jurisdiction over junkyards. It is, their primary purpose, as everyone knows, is for the employees and the employer-employee relationship. But there are other entities, and DHEC certainly could get involved. The sheriff's office can get involved. I was thinking language along these lines might work. A government, you can lose it if a government agency, which would be DHEC, those type of places, or a court of competent jurisdiction, so that could be someone brings an action, issues an order or other or similar enforcement document finding a health or safety violation at the commercial junkyard, which is the second such enforcement action at the junkyard within the past 12 or 24 months, something like that. If you're looking for a official, hey, here's some body with authority made a finding that you have a safety violation, that language works.
and when you say a court of competent jurisdiction, a neighbor who just has a personal grudge, if they brought it through, then we're leaning on the judge to weed that out.
Correct. And not all courts are gonna have jurisdiction to make a finding in that regard. It's very rare that a municipal or magistrate's court would, based on a neighbor's complaint, though they could if the county were to bring something, a uniform ordinance violation. So, yes, it wouldn't just be based on a neighbor complaint.
We have a motion to eliminate item number 4. Would you want to amend that to replace?
Yes.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Any discussion regarding that? to replace current wording of number 4 with Mr. Root's suggested wording of number 4. Any discussion there? Let's vote. All those in favor of changing number 4 to Mr. Root's number 4, raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Do you wanna pick a number from 12 to 24? Plug in there, what?
How many
Um,
violations, within the past 2 years, within the past 1 year,
I think
One.
1.
12 months?
Yep. All right, moving on to item D. Once a nonconforming loses its grandfathered status as a result of the conditions of A and C above, which Mr. Root is going to be working on, then it must comply with the terms that follow. Regarding fencing, all requirements shall apply, and that they have 18 months to comply. Also, B and C regarding setbacks. And then items D through H.
But we got rid of G and H, correct? Or
So
F, G,
note
and
under
H?
2, under setbacks, there may be existing junkyards that are already outside of those setbacks and things like that. So I think there was original wording that was even different than that. Actually, there wasn't any wording. Sorry. So if people are good with those as written, is there anyone that wants to change anything there?
I'm gonna bring this up just as a topic, but I'd like to see you got 18 months with the E, as a capitalized E. In that 1A.
Yes,
Is
sir.
everybody with me?
Yep.
What I'd like to move is that we ask Mr. Root and staff, to look for any kind of grammatical errors and make adjustments that we would approve.
Absolutely.
That we would approve that, without having to come back to make it.
Yes.
No way.
I'll second that.
Those are friendly amendments, so yes.
Oh, okay, yes, please. You were asking to make an amendment?
No, I'm saying that.
That was
would be
simply a friendly amendment.
That's a
Okay.
given.
Gotcha. No other changes with,
Could we vote on that, Mr. Chair? Could we vote on that, please?
okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous. Thank you.
All right, so it brings us down to the provisions for the administration, and I just made a note that I really would like James to, because this really falls on him, to determine if somebody is making application for a junkyard, what's involved in making that application.
Seems fair to me.
I think the same thing with regard to registering, if you'd like to see them register by email or phone or however you want them registering. If you would come up with what seems best.
So all of our permits are pretty consistent. They are available online through the permitting software we use. This would be a development permit, just like a subdivision or a plat review or a vegetative buffer permit. Those 3 items that we identified previously, the site plan, and then any of the other permits that they would require, so that's gonna be the discharge permit, and then the certificate of compliance. So that's basically closing out that permit and telling that new place that they can operate.
So do you also want to include in here on how somebody would register? Because on registering, I'm seeing somebody calling in going, hey, can you come tell me if you are defining me as a commercial junkyard? Is
I
that,
think we need to go back to where we started with the registration and get the answer to that before we put it.
so that wouldn't go into this section?
I don't think so. I think, it could, but if we determine that we're going to do that or not going to do that. So if we're gonna have a registration or not have a registration.
I think did we not agree to it in agreeing to this document?
We have an explicitly in your.
Let's see, I thought we had that they had so many months to register.
18.
The 755A, or where are you, I'm sorry?
Gotcha. Yes, within 8 months, they would, and Mr. Root was looking into about the GIS part, but the 8 months to register, I don't know that that's a question.
Okay. I was looking at that whole thing as looking at the validity of that entire
Gotcha.
box. I'm sorry, that's my misunderstanding.
If there is a question of validity of the first part of that section A is really two parts. It's a register within 8 months, and that staff would then put it in the GIS system.
Yeah, my only concern is with
With the GIS, okay. So if you would, how is someone, if you would just put that, come up with something in there from a staff standpoint that says, I might have a commercial junkyard, I got a bunch of junk, I do sell something every once in a while, can I talk to you on the phone about it? Or whatever it might be, that you then are defining, yeah, you're a commercial junkyard, let's go ahead and get you registered. And how that process would work. Yes, sir.
Make a motion that we strike Exhibit A.
Which page are you on?
Last page.
Yeah, that was the one that's been lingering around for a couple of years. It was gonna be inserted in at some point, I think, to 755.
It'd be page 5, bottom, page 5.
It's no longer necessary now that we
Yeah.
determined that 755 Delta is how we're applying it, right?
Yeah, this was just other options, I think, that were put in at one point. I agree, that would clean it up.
So A comes out. So you're making a motion, I'll second that motion. Is there any other discussion on that? Everybody know where we're talking about? All those in favor of removing it? Aye. I think that, let's see, and again, everything under that, under 32-756, James, is for you to finish up there. I'm not sure what the Exhibit A, that was something that came through the county.
That was relaxations if you backfitted somebody.
Okay, so that's just not part of it at all.
Not anymore.
Yep, okay. I think we're there. I'd like to make a motion that Mr. Root get back to us at our next meeting, if that's possible.
I'll make every effort, should be.
We don't have another meeting this month. Is that correct, James, or is it Thursday?
No, we do.
I think we have one on.
Thursday.
We have one on Thursday, the 19th, so that may or may not happen then. With regard to that A and C, if we could try to get something finalized that we could vote on to send to council or not, that would be wonderful, if at all possible.
Should not be difficult. I'm supposed to be on truncated hours under the new contract. Hasn't been working out that way. But I'll do my very best.
I like,
No coordination piece with James getting Mr. Root the information.
yes, and James has been instructed, if you would, to get that last segment to Mr. Root, to be able to implement into that ordinance. I hear a motion.
Spends a lot of time together.
Hey, we're almost there, though. This was 4 years in the workings. And I think we have something is a good foundation piece. Motion to adjourn, second. All those in favor? All those in favor?